Now let's talk about Dylan Mulvaney, the trans woman whom our audience may remember from that disastrous Budweiser ad when a biological man dressed as a woman tried to sell beer. Well, Dylan has now released a new book, Paper Doll: Notes from a Late Bloomer. Now, you have written a great article online about this, Brendan, called Dylan Mulvaney's Creepy Fantasies of Girlhood. What does this say, do you think, about the trans movement?
It's such a terrible book. I mean, it's really badly written apart from anything else, but it is also really creepy. He does talk about wanting to be a girl, becoming a girl. He talks about his womanhood on one page, and then he talks about his penis on the next page. I'm sorry, I'm one of those old-fashioned people who thinks that if you have a penis, you're not a woman. Sue me, but that's my view. But when I read this book, I thought to myself how out of time the trans ideology now feels already. I know we're only 6 weeks or whatever into Trump and everything else, but it does feel outdated already. And reading this book, I thought to myself, in the future, people are going to look back on our era and they're going to think we were crazy. They're going to say, how did you give puberty blocking drugs to young kids? Why did you mutilate and drug young lesbians in order to turn them into so-called men? Why did you allow men into women's spaces, including women's changing rooms where they could parade around naked in front of women and girls? We used to call that indecent exposure, and now we're supposed to call it trans rights. So as I read this book, I just thought this ideology is on its way out. And I think in the future, people are going to look back on this stuff in the same way that we now look back on lobotomies. And they're going to say, why did you let this happen?
Well, Brendan, I certainly hope you're right. And I must encourage viewers, your article on Spiked Online is an absolute joy to read. You had me laughing and outraged all at the same time, which I think is always the definition of great writing. So people should go online and find that article. I want to ask you about the Trump administration, and they've made an interesting decision to consider travel bans on almost 43 countries, including Afghanistan, North Korea, Iran, Syria and Cuba. Now, of course, last time Trump was in office, he instituted some bans on a few countries and was immediately accused of racism. But it makes sense to me that Western nations should start to be a lot more particular about where they allow people to come from. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, particularly as someone living in the UK.
Yeah, well, Trump was voted into power by a vast cross-race section of the working classes in America to do various different things. Firstly, to re-energize the American economy, which he has promised to do. Secondly, to get rid of wokeness, which he's definitely doing. And thirdly, to control the borders, to make sure that we know who is coming to America, why they're coming here, are they coming legally or illegally, where are they coming from, what values are they bringing with them? These are the questions that ordinary Americans are asking, and I think they're perfectly within their rights to ask them. The thing is that for the past few decades, we've lived under these kind of globalist elites, these ruling classes who look to global institutions more than they do to their own people. They've thrown open their borders. They've said that anyone can come here to work, to compete for jobs, to push down wages, to make life harder for working people in America or in Britain or in Australia. And voters have had enough of it. They're now saying, listen, we want firmer control at our borders. We want to know who's coming into the country. Are they going to take our jobs? Are they going to bring ideological views that we don't like? That's the kind of thing people are asking. I think they're right to ask it. And Trump is now doing what he told the American people that he would do.
Yeah, that was his election mandate. So you can't blame him for doing what he said he would. Now, we've got to show you this, Brendan, because Trump derangement syndrome's in full swing in Canada, with lefties letting out their rage by smashing photos of him. Have a look at this.
Some might call it a smashing good time. A nationwide surge in frustration over Trump's tariffs on Canada has sparked a new idea at a rage room in Halifax.
What you see here is a drop in a bucket.
Owner Terry LeBlanc is giving customers a free frame photo of U.S. President Donald Trump to smash.
Oh, Brendan, they've really lost it now, haven't they?
A rage room in Halifax in Canada. I mean, have you ever heard of anything more sad than that? I just think, Trump derangement syndrome is such a funny sickness, isn't it? Because it was really, really powerful and widespread in 2016. But I think it's disappearing. Obviously, there are people like this lunatic with his sledgehammer smashing a picture, such an impotent form of rage that is. But generally speaking, I think Trump derangement syndrome is withering. I think people now realize, even wet, crazy liberals now realize that millions upon millions of Americans and Europeans and Australians want political change and they're willing to vote for it. So, yes, there will be impotent outbursts like those in Canada, but most people, I think, have woken up to the fact that ordinary people don't like the way politics is going.
Absolutely. Impotent and incredibly infantile, I would add. Brendan O'Neill, thanks for joining us tonight. It's always an absolute joy to talk to you.